Herringbone hardwood flooring has been popular for hundreds, if not thousands of years. These floors can be found in castles throughout Europe and luxury homes across North America. A herringbone hardwood floor provides a client's home with a unique, traditional look. This video was made to show clients how to install a herringbone hardwood floor. At Gaylord Hardwood Flooring, we can make you pre-cut herringbone flooring, but this video will show you how to install a herringbone floor from scratch, using normal hardwood flooring and tools that any professional hardwood flooring installer should own. The first step is to measure and cut the boards to length. In a herringbone installation, all of the boards need to be cut the same length, and the lengths of those boards need to be a multiple of the width. For this installation, we'll be installing planks 5 inches wide by 30 inches long. When the board has been cut perfectly to length, you can set up a template or jig. For this one, we have screwed a piece of scrap flooring to the base as a stopper for the boards. This ensures that the boards are all cut to the same length without having to measure each individual piece. It is always good to periodically check the lengths of the boards to ensure your stopper piece hasn't shifted. The pieces you have just cut will not have a groove on the end of the board, so you'll need to make your own. This is done using a router. Make sure you use a piece of flooring from the factory with a groove to ensure you set the router to the proper depth, so the new groove will match the existing groove. The hardwood flooring we are using for this installation is pre-finished with a micro bevel on all 4 sides. Since we have cut the boards off square, we'll need to make our own micro bevel. This can be done using a sanding block by hand or with a sander we are using today for more consistency. The bevels we have just sanded will also need to be stained to match the other bevels. This can be done using matching stain or a stain pen. Now that the hardwood flooring is cut, beveled, and grooved, we can get started with our layout. First, we'll need to measure and mark the center of the room on both sides. Then we'll chalk a line across those points. We always recommend spraying your chalk line with urethane. This will preserve the line so it doesn't get smudged and will also make it stand out much better. After we have chalked a line across the room, we'll need to measure out the center of that line, and we now need to make a perpendicular line from the center of the room, which we'll do using Trammel points and a long straight piece of hardwood flooring. Trammel points can be purchased from Lee Valley or other woodworking stores. Next to a tape measure, Trammel points are the most important tool for an installer when laying out a hardwood floor. Without this basic tool, custom hardwood floors would be nearly impossible. Separate the Trammel points a few feet apart. Use them to mark an equal distance on both sides of the center line. Extend the Trammel points further to the end of the board. The longer you can extend the Trammel points, the more accurate your final line will be. Place one of the Trammel points on the mark you just made and draw an arc across the center where the perpendicular line will be. This will need to be done from the points on both sides of your center line. These arcs will intersect at the point where the center line will eventually be. You will now chalk a perpendicular line using the points where the arcs meet on both sides. This line will be perfectly perpendicular to your original line. Use the Trammel points in the same way as before to find the intersecting points of the 4 right triangles. You will chalk a line across the intersecting arcs across from each other. If this is done properly, all of these lines will meet perfectly in the center of the room. For this installation, the clients would like a border installed 5 boards wide around the perimeter of the room to align with their ceiling. To mark these lines, we'll need to measure the proper distance from the center lines. It is important that you measure these lines from the center line versus the wall, because even in new homes, walls are never quite square. It is nice to have a laser square on hand to test and make sure your perimeter lines are not out of square. Now we can begin laying out how our herringbone boards will be installed. You will need to chalk working lines on both sides of the perpendicular line you have just chalked to use as a guide as you install the boards. Placing painter's tape on the face of the board for marking ensures you can see your lines, and if you make a mistake, you can easily take the tape off and redo it. To find the distance from the center line to your working lines, you will need to use a square to mark a 45-degree angle from the tip of one side of the board. Next, draw a 45-degree line from the opposite tip of the board end to meet with your first line. Together, these lines will look like a T. Mark a line from the intersection of these two lines to the edge of the board. From that point on the edge of the board, use your square to draw a parallel line to your original 45-degree line. This is the line you will be aligning to the center line you have already chalked on the floor. The original 45-degree line you drew on the board will be what you use to mark your working line. Lay out a few boards, aligning them with your working lines. Mark this out on the floor as your starting point. These lines should be square, but you will always want to double check before installing your backer board. Screw down some scrap pieces of flooring behind the line you have just traced and rest them against the pieces of flooring you will be installing. Once the backer boards have been screwed into place, you can finally begin installation. Nail one board on each side, making sure the ends line up perfectly. All of the boards you have cut will now have a groove on the end. Some of these boards will require a tongue on the end, so we'll need to use a spline to make our own tongue. Use a matching spline and cut it to size. These splines will be glued and nailed on the ends of the boards where required. From there onward, you can continue nailing boards across the room. It is very important to make sure all of the boards line up properly on the ends. Once you've installed 7 or 8 boards this way, the pieces should be good and solid. At this point, you can unscrew the backer board. Put glue in the groove and set the spline into the groove and nail it into place. This will reverse the direction of your installation so you can continue to install boards until you reach your border line. Once you've installed this V formation across the entire room, you will need to reverse direction and continue back the other way. For this, you'll dry fit a few boards into place and ensure they are aligned. Then you'll screw in another backer board, and from here you can continue your installation the other way. Once the flooring has been installed throughout the entire area within the border perimeter, we'll need to cut the boards along the previously marked border line. For this, we'll be using a Festool plunge saw with a track. We'll be required to cut about 22 feet of the flooring, so we'll need to connect 2 8-foot sections and 1 6-foot section of track. We have put painter's tape on the wood flooring, which we can use to make our marks on and ensure the tracks line up. Then we will use the Festool saw to cut this line along the entire length of the room. This will be required on all 4 sides where the border lines are marked. The boards we have just cut with our Festool saw will not have a tongue or groove around the perimeter, so we'll have to create the grooves ourselves using a router. Again, this will need to be set to depth using a piece of the factory milled flooring as a guide. For the Festool saw and the router, it is important you don't have any nails along the line where you will be cutting and routering. The boards cut along the perimeter will also not have a bevel like the rest of the boards, so we'll need to make one by hand using a sanding block. These edges will also need to be stained like before when we beveled the ends of the cut boards. This can be done using stain or a stain pen. Next, we'll need to glue the grooves and insert the spline around the entire perimeter of the floor. Once the glue is dried and set in, it will need to be nailed using the flooring nailer. The remaining border pieces around the perimeter will be installed the same as you would close out against the wall in any flooring installation. So now you know how to install a herringbone floor. As you can see, it is really not that difficult as long as you have the proper tools and know what you're doing. And the impact in a home is quite phenomenal. If you have any questions about herringbone hardwood flooring or anything else, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.